I don't want to set the world on fire.
Hi everyone, Violet Irwin here. It's time for another car confessional, and specifically for another piece of the property manifesto. So today I'd like to continue on with my more detailed explanations of the 4 kinds of property rights. Last time I focused on real property and I went into detail about the bundle of sticks and the 6 basic rights that are associated with property ownership. But today I'm going to talk about personal property and how that same bundle of sticks will apply to personal property instead of real property. So if you recall, the 6 rights that I want to focus on in terms of the bundle of sticks are the right to possess, the right to control, the right to enjoy, the right to exclude, the right to destroy, and the right to convey. Now I'm going to apply those same 6 sticks in the bundle of sticks to personal property. But first we have to define what personal property is. So as I said in the very first video of the property manifesto, personal property includes all movable objects that you can own, in effect. That would mean anything that's not fixed into the ground that you can move, that you can possess, and that you can own. That is personal property. So that includes anything from a grain of rice that you own to your car or to your yacht, right? Because a yacht's movable, unlike a house. A house is fixed into land. Real property, like a plot of land, is fixed into the earth. Same thing with the mineral rights. You can pull the oil out of there, but in general, as it naturally occurs, it's in the earth. Personal property, on the other hand, is that which you can move around, like this car, like that camera, like these rings, like these sunglasses, like my earrings. All that stuff is personal property. Now later in this video, I'll get into the irony of how Antifa is going about their Marxist revolution. And how silly that is, given that they're using personal property items in order to try to bring about a regime that would have no personal property. It's all a lot of fun. But first, before I do that, now that we know what personal property is, I want to talk about each of the sticks in the bundle and how that would relate to a specific kind of personal property. So let's just take my GoPro as an example. It's what I'm filming this video on. And we'll go through all of the sticks. So the first stick is the right to possess, and that applies to my personal property here because I have a right it was actually a present. I have a right by receiving this GoPro as a gift to possess it, and that means that I can have it in my car, I can have it in my house, I can carry it around in my purse, I can hold it in my hand. Again, it's my possession, right? I possess it. And it's right here in my car. I'm exercising my right to possess it presently. The second stick in the bundle is the right to control, which I'm also presently utilizing with my GoPro, because by turning it on and having it set to record, I am controlling that piece of property. I'm using the buttons, I'm using the functions, I'm benefiting from the use of the GoPro. No one else is, it's mine. I'm the one using it, I'm the one controlling it. I have it synced up with my phone to facilitate this recording, and that's me exercising my right to control. There is a motorcyclist here that's trying to do some really dangerous shit. Yeah, that looked really fucking crazy. The third stick in the bundle of sticks is the right to enjoy. And is it enjoyable to record these videos on my GoPro? I think it kind of is. I certainly enjoy being able to use the GoPro to upload the videos later. But you can understand how just by virtue of owning this camera that's a GoPro, I can enjoy it by filming things with it, and by expressing my views with it, and by using it with my computer to edit videos and give them to all of you. So I really enjoy using this possession, and that's my right because I own it. No one else can just come in and say, hey, I'm going to enjoy your GoPro. Like, I know you own it or whatever, but I'm just going to take it and enjoy it. We all would know that that makes no sense, right? That's stealing. You can't do that. So that's the right to enjoy in terms of a personal possession. right to exclude means you get to choose who gets to use or do anything with your personal property. So, for example, let's go away from the GoPro for a minute just to illustrate this one a little bit more clearly. One of the problems with someone coming and stealing your purse, right? Like the classic New York crime is some little old lady on the side of the street with her purse, and a robber comes up and grabs the purse and snatches it and runs away, right? And the problem with that is it's a violation of your right to exclude, because you have a right to say, no, robber, this is my purse and you don't get to steal it from me, right? We all inherently know that some random guy on the street can't just take a little old lady's purse. That kind of theft just hurts us deep down, right? We understand innately that you shouldn't be taking a little old lady's possessions. And that goes for everyone's personal possessions too. And that's the right to exclude. You have the right to say, no, other human beings, this is my possession and I get to keep it. I get to exclude you from it. It's mine to exclude you from. And that's one of my sticks in my bundle of sticks that comes along with owning this personal property. So the right to destroy is the fifth property right associated with personal property too. And the right to destroy in terms of this GoPro would be that, you know, I could crush it. I could run over it with a car. I could throw it off a cliff. I could throw it into a furnace, you know? I don't know why I would do that. Most people don't want to destroy their personal property. But for the most part, you have the right to destroy that which you own. And we all know this inherently. I mean, you wouldn't be able to eat food that you buy if you didn't have the right to destroy your personal possessions, right? Because you go to the grocery store, you spend money, you know, that's an exchange, that's a conveyance of food from the grocery store to you, and you now own your food. So let's say you make a nice steak dinner with all these beautiful greens and rice and all that stuff. If you didn't have the right to destroy, you couldn't consume it because you wouldn't have a right to do that. And what good is owning the food if you can't consume it, if you can't destroy it? What good is even having that ownership in that personal property? So we can see the right to destroy is really important when it comes to consumption. But similarly, if you have personal business documents, you have a right to shred those and destroy all that information. You don't have to let anyone see that. You can get rid of it. If you have a diary, you can destroy that diary. You can throw it away. It's part of your property ownership. The sixth stick in the bundle of sticks as it pertains to personal property is the right to convey. And this one is so obvious that without it, our entire economic system would collapse. And that's because our economy is based on the exchange of goods, both nationally and internationally. So if you didn't have the right to convey goods, the grocery store wouldn't even have the right to sell you the steak or to sell you the broccoli, right? Think about it this way. You couldn't sell anything without the right to convey. You couldn't buy anything without the right to convey. So all these socialist types who are super into welfare and who say, oh, you know, you need to give me money. Money in itself is personal property. You need to give me all this money. You need to give me free food, or you need to give me free health care, which really comes down to goods after a certain point, right? Like medications and vaccines, and, you know, there's a lot that goes into healthcare that's the result of you actually purchasing goods. So if you took away the right to convey personal property, the entire economic system of exchanging goods between people would break down. You wouldn't have boutiques, you wouldn't have restaurants, you couldn't have stores, right? And not only that, you couldn't go buy anything. You couldn't go buy food, you couldn't go buy clothes, you couldn't buy anything. So you have to have the right to convey to facilitate the entire economy functioning. And in terms of a GoPro, the right to convey, the store that, I got this as a gift. So the individual who bought this for me, whatever store they bought it from, used their right to convey to sell it to the person who bought it for me. And then they used their right to convey personal property to give me that same GoPro. And now if I wanted to get rid of the GoPro, could sell it to somebody else, and that would be me using my right to convey. we can see that it's clear that the bundle of sticks that we apply to real property applies also to personal property when we go through that list, right? It's clear that that's the basis of a lot of the laws that protect personal property rights. For example, there are many crimes that are defined by violations to personal property. Often, if you look at a criminal code in any jurisdiction, they'll have a section that's called crimes to personal property. So we understand that there's rights in personal property. So that's why, and I mentioned this in the previous video, if you steal my GoPro, that's theft. If you steal my car, that's grand theft auto. And that's pretty simple. We also have something in civil law called conversion, which is pretty much civil theft. So for example, if somebody took this GoPro, not only could a prosecutor come in and prosecute them for stealing, for theft, larceny, if you want to have the legal term for it, but I could go in and sue them for conversion, because in effect what they're doing is taking my right to control the GoPro, taking my right to possess the GoPro, taking my right to enjoy it, taking my right to convey it, taking my right to exclude from it, all of that, right? So there's civil penalties that can be enforced as well. And I'm not going to spend too much time on theft and conversion because we understand those pretty inherently. Just like I talked about with the robber, we all know you can't steal someone's purse. We all know you can't just go into a grocery store and take whatever you want off the shelves, or walk into a Best Buy and just walk out with a laptop. That's stealing personal property. It's stealing a movable object, and that is kind of the basis of theft and all of that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Now I'm going to talk about some special issues in personal property and things that you might not have thought about that actually are just violations of one of the 6 rights in the bundle of sticks of personal property. So one of the topics that's relevant to personal property, especially in recent years, is what kind of property rights you have in your cell phone. And it's something that's been litigated a lot, and something that ultimately affirms my opinions about property rights. So a little background in law. Of course, we all know in the Constitution we have our 4th Amendment, which prevents unreasonable searches and seizures, and the searches apply to personal property. So one of the issues recently has been, what kind of property rights do you have in your cell phone? What does it mean to have an unreasonable search of your cell phone? And if you think about it, it makes sense that this would be an issue, because in our day and age, the cell phone has replaced so much of what used to be our personal effects, right? Many people don't have filing cabinets in their homes anymore. They just use their cell phone, and it makes sense. Their cell phone you have all your contact information in there. So address books are now kind of irrelevant. We don't really need those. Instead of having a ledger of everything that you've said to other people, you have emails, so that's all on your phone. You have all of your text messages, which is really another level, because instead of just having phone conversations that could have been tapped, now you have all of this data in terms of texting that's on a cell phone that is very personal. You also have all of your social media information, so anything you Facebooked or tweeted, if you have those apps, you can access them and probably use them. And most of us use banking apps, which means that all of your bank information, your credit card information, stuff like that's on your cell phone. So your cell phone is the equivalent of pretty much opening a safe in your home these days. If you get past the key password on the beginning of your cell phone, I mean, you basically can know someone's whole life these days. I mean, some people don't put their whole lives onto their cell phone, but most people do, and especially millennials, we've got our whole lives on our phones. So luckily, we've got a Supreme Court that still does care about personal property rights, at least a little bit, and they did rule that you need a warrant to be able to hack into someone's cell phone and access all of that information, because you do have a privacy interest in all of that information. So in effect, what the Supreme Court said in a case a couple years back was that your cell phone is pretty much like a safe. It's a container that contains a lot of personal information, deeply personal information, that cannot just be accessed by the government willy-nilly. They need to have a warrant, which means they need to have probable cause that something inside of your cell phone will prove that you have committed a crime or that someone's committed a crime, right? They have to have probable cause to believe that. So that's one of the things with the cell phone. And that's why all of this NSA spying is so troubling, because in effect, they are circumventing the Fourth Amendment and the property rights we have on our personal property by turning on our cameras and our voice recorders without our knowledge, and by collecting all of our text messages and all of our personal cell phone data and all of our emails and all of our yada yada. I mean, these are all egregious violations of the bundle of sticks as it pertains to personal property. I mean, just think about it. Your right to possess, the first one, it's gone, right? As soon as the NSA goes in there and takes all your emails and stores them in some other database, they're now possessing your personal property. They're taking something from a movable item that you own, which is your cell phone, and they're duplicating it and then possessing it themselves. So that's a violation of the right to possess. In terms of the right to control, I mean, yeah, you have no control over what happens to your emails after they go in there and take them. You have no control over that whatsoever. It's a complete violation of your right to control. Your right to enjoy, I mean, that one might not be violated so much in the specific instance because I can still use my cell phone as much as I'd like. Although I do think that there's a chilling effect with the knowledge that they're doing that I might be a little bit hesitant to share certain content or do certain things with my cell phone because I know that the NSA is watching. And so because of that, they really kind of are, at least in theory, kind of dabbling in my right to enjoy. In terms of my right to exclude, they're violating that outright by going into my cell phone without my consent in the first place. And my right to destroy, effectively they're violating that too, because any content that's on my cell phone that they take, they've now duplicated. So if I want to go in and wipe my cell phone, if they have all the content, they're interfering with my right to destroy that content, right? And lastly, with the right to convey, they are certainly violating the right to convey, especially as you see how a lot of the stuff that's kind of been taken from us will ultimately be sold to third-party companies who will then use that information for advertising and other things. I mean, the insidiousness of what the NSA does with our personal property items like our cell phones and laptops and iPads and televisions and even, I don't know, like refrigerators now. I mean, what the NSA does with that violates all 6 sticks in the bundle at once, and that's why it's just horrible. It is just horrible. And again, I have managed to get on a rant, and I am sorry about that. Whew. I'll take it back a step. Frankly, y'all should buckle up though, because I haven't even gotten into taxation and how that's a violation of your personal property rights as well. So, and we all know, I mean, this is a classic libertarian idiom, and I am a libertarian, taxation is theft. And the reason taxation is theft is because it's a gross violation of your personal property rights. Personal property obviously includes money. It includes your cash. It includes gold, silver, you know, any kind of means of exchange. It would include rice. It would include, I don't know, what have people used as money? Beans. You can hold it, you can move it, you use it as a medium of exchange, which means that you're kind of selling and buying it. So, to help you understand how this works, in effect, any transaction you do, for example, when you go to the grocery store and you pay $5 for a bushel of apples, you're actually conveying your $5 to the grocery store, and they're conveying the apples to you. It's a mutual conveyance, but you're still giving personal property to the grocery store when you do that. So money is personal property. So let me explain why taxation is theft and why specifically the income tax is the most insidious kind of taxation, and why, if we really want to have an ethical taxation system, we should move to purely a sales tax situation. And the reason why a sales tax situation would be better is because it's still voluntary at a certain level, whereas the income tax is not voluntary, and that's the big difference, okay? So, let's talk about why the income tax is a violation of your personal property rights and why it's the worst kind of it. one of the reasons why the income tax is so bad in terms of personal property is because, and let me be clear, I'm talking about our income tax in particular, wherein the federal government, unless you work for yourself, actually withholds the taxes from you before you even receive a paycheck, right? And most Americans are on this payment schedule where you get a check at the beginning of the month or the end of the month or whatever, and on your statement it says, you know, the federal government withheld this much for income taxes, this much for Medicare, and this much for Social Security. And to me, this is such an egregious violation of your personal property rights because, I mean, you never even got to possess it in the first place, right? You work at your job, however many hours you work your butt off, you go in, you work for some boss that's a dick, and you know, you work all these long hours and yada yada, and then before you even touch it, before you even get to sniff it, the federal government already has its hands up in there taking it from you. And you know what that means? That means, and we'll get into this much more in property of body, but that means that you are in effect a slave to the federal government. It's a matter of degree of slavery, yes, but you don't have a say in how, or let me put it this way, you don't get to decide how much of what you earn you actually keep. And that's just a violation of your personal property rights in that money. So if I work for a retail store and I make $10 an hour and the federal government takes 30% of that before I ever get it, they've taken away my bundle of sticks as it pertains to that 30% of my paycheck. That's my paycheck. I acquired it by virtue of my labor, by using my property of body to acquire that personal possession in that paycheck. And the federal government is taking a slice of that, and state governments too, are taking a slice of that before I even have it. They're violating all 6 of my property rights in the bundle at once with that. It's like, talk about a backhanded slap to the face of the American people when this is supposedly a country that cares about property rights. It's like, we can't even get personal property rights at all. We violate it in the most egregious way every single fucking time someone gets a paycheck with income tax withholding. It's horrible. I don't know how, as a country that claims to care about liberty, we have allowed this insidious tax to continue from 1913 to the present. I mean, it is just disgusting. It is such a horrible violation of personal property rights. Like, I just can't even tell you. And like I said, property of body will really dig deep into why the income tax sucks. But in effect, it's violating all 6 of your property rights at once as it pertains to your paycheck, and that's why it's so awful. But the reason why the sales tax, while I still would rather it not exist, I think it is the best option in terms of taxes, because I do think that a government has to exist in some fashion, and the only way for it to exist is through taxes in some way or another. But the goal would be to choose the most ethical version of taxes, and the sales tax is the most ethical because it would apply proportionally based on income already. That's one thing. Let's think about that, right? If you are very poor, you don't actually get to spend that much money. You're not going out to Neiman Marcus and buying, you know, a $3,000 gown, right? You're maybe going to the grocery store spending $50. So you could pay a sales tax on that $50. And the reason why it's voluntary is because you're still going and choosing to purchase those items with your personal property. You choose what day you buy it on, you choose which store you buy it from, you choose the quantity, you choose the quality, you know, it's your choice what you buy with your personal property. So, in effect, it would be the most voluntary version of a tax, because all these other versions of taxes, like the estate tax and the real estate tax and the capital gains tax, those apply just by virtue of you owning certain kinds of property. And to me, those kind of taxes should be illegal. But I think that the sales tax, at least it's a choice. And for those libertarians who are real purists who say, well, there's certain things that you know, you have to buy, right? Like without food, you die. Without water, you die. If you don't have energy like electricity or heat, you might die. So maybe we could exclude those goods from taxation, right? And it could just be taxes solely based on leisure items, luxury goods, and on even personally, I think stuff like cell phones, that's not necessary. People want to try to say that the internet's required now. It's not. You can go to a library and use a fucking computer if you really need the internet. So I would say maybe we could get it to a place where it's like basic necessities for living. You can't put a sales tax on that, but everything else is sales taxable, and that's where government revenue comes from. That would be the most ethical way to tax personal property, because then you'd only pay the tax if you thought it was worth it to pay the tax to buy that particular good. And we see that even like in Colorado, right? We legalized marijuana here, and the tax on marijuana here is outrageous. It's something like 25%. But the people who want marijuana are still gonna buy it because they want it even with that tax. They voluntarily will pay that tax to get that good. So at least it's voluntary. At least you're giving me the choice to decide what kind of goods I apply my sales taxes to. And the real rich types who spend all their money on luxurious meals and vacations and yachts and all that crap will end up paying higher taxes anyway because they're the ones consuming the most. So that's why the sales tax would be the most ideal. And you know, in a perfect world, I totally understand the anarcho-capitalist argument. In a perfect world where we didn't have any reason why the government should exist, I totally would say, yes, you know, we just need to abolish all taxes because it is theft. Even in the sales tax instance, you're basically acquiescing to a theft. So in terms of the sales tax, the government is still actually violating all 6 of those property rights. So yes, it's still a theft, and that's why it still would be a violation of a property right. But at least in that instance, it would be based on purchases that individuals are entering into voluntarily, contracts that individuals want to be in voluntarily, versus this whole taxing people's labor. I mean, to me, that would be the same thing as taxing food or water, right? If we want to talk about what's necessary, taxing that what you need to do, people have to work to live. And to say as the federal government, if you're gonna acquire personal property through your own labor, we've got a slice of that, the answer is no. That's not how personal property works. And if we're gonna be a country that says, we value property rights, we've got to get rid of the income tax. We have to get rid of the personal income tax. It is just such a disgusting violation of specifically personal property rights, but also the property of body, which I'll get into in the next video. And until we do that, we really are going to keep going down this sort of Marxist rabbit hole, because once you say that taxation is inherently kind of good and we just need to tax the rich and all of that, your personal property rights go out the window. So we need to, if we're gonna have taxes, we should have a sales tax, and we should understand in implementing such sales tax, and I think it should be written in the very legislation, that the sales tax is but a necessary evil in order to facilitate the government doing the very, very minimal functions that it needs to do so that the country can stay free and be protected from invasion and war. And I'm sorry, I know I got a little ranty in that one too. Taxation really gets to us libertarians, as I think is pretty common knowledge. So once again, taxation is theft, and we need to reduce it as much as we possibly can while still being able to maintain our civilized and free nation. The last thing I want to talk about as it pertains to personal property is inflation. And the reason I want to talk about inflation is because it's a form of theft. And governments have been using inflationary techniques to steal from their populations since ancient Rome. And it's important to know why inflation is so insidious, because so many people think that it's just like, oh, you know, stuff gets more expensive. sometimes. You know, it just kind of naturally gets more expensive, and I don't really know why. It's just the way of the world. And when I was a kid, I thought that too. I just thought, well, things will just kind of keep getting more expensive and there's nothing we can do about it. But that's actually not the real state of being that the economy would be in if we kind of just got the fucking government out of the way, and had them stop stealing the value of our money. Because what inflation does is, if there's a certain amount of dollars that exists, the government comes in and says, we're going to create more dollars. And as we all know, in supply and demand, if you create a bigger supply, that means that the value is going to go down because the demand's going to go down because there's more access, right? So the way that that works with goods like food and, you know, personal possessions like cell phones and all of that also works when it comes to money. So if you have a grocery store and you have steak at that grocery store and there's 5 steaks and there's 10 customers, right? The steak is going to be more expensive than if there were 10 steaks and 10 customers, because now all 10 people can get a steak, whereas before only 5 could, right? So in the same way, if $5 exists and 10 people exist, each of those people can only have 50 cents, right? But all of a sudden, if $10 exists because the federal government just makes 5 extra dollars, now all those 10 people can have $1. And initially you think, oh, that's great. Everyone just doubled their money. But the issue is that the amount of goods that that money can chase has not changed. So that same $10 applies to the same amount of goods. So in that steak example, all of a sudden, there's 2 times the money to chase after the same amount of steak, so the price of steak is probably going to double, right? Because it's going to balance out the supply and demand of the cash flow. So what they used to do in ancient Rome was they used to have a silver denarius, that was kind of their main coin, and the Roman government used to nick off the corners of the coin to make it weigh less and less, because back then, more reasonably, money was actually based on weight, not based on just whatever number it said, right? It was based on how much it weighed. So the Roman government would nick it on the corners and then take all of those extra scraps and melt them into new coins. And this inflationary practice eventually led to the destruction of the kind of middle class that had been created in ancient Rome. And, you know, yada yada, the story of ancient Rome. Ultimately, it kind of went down badly. One of the reasons why Rome inflated that way was because they wanted to finance all of their wars and all of their empire building. And that's exactly what the federal government is doing now. Instead of clipping the corners of coins, though, what the federal government does is just create money on a computer somewhere that didn't used to exist before. And I'll make a video later describing the exact mechanisms of how the Federal Reserve creates money. But let me tell you, they have created trillions and trillions of dollars over the last decade or so. And a lot of that has not really come to roost in terms of our prices because, you know, it's been exported abroad, or, you know, it just takes time for money to process through the market and for supply and demand to equalize. But as I'm sure most of you can tell, if you shop at any grocery store in this country or have been buying gas or doing any kind of shopping at all, you'll know that your dollar doesn't go as far as it used to. Not even close. I mean, even if you just look at something as simple as McDonald's, a double cheeseburger 10 years ago used to be 99 cents, and now it's well over $2. So think about that. In 10 years, the cost of a double cheeseburger has more than doubled. Everyone wants to say there's no inflation. But the reason I'm talking about all of this is because it's really a violation of your personal property rights for the federal government. To the extent that your money loses value, they're violating your 6 property rights in that money to the extent that that value is lost. Because you never get to enjoy that money, you never get to possess that money, you don't get to control it or exclude from it or anything, because the government has taken that value away from you. And that's part of your personal property. So we gotta do something about the Federal Reserve and inflation too, because that too is a violation of your personal property rights. And with that, I'm gonna end this video on personal property and how it's being violated in the current world. I wanna thank all of you so much for tuning in, and please like and subscribe below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.
I I just want to start a flame in your heart.